Hello, I'm Jim Miller. Reggie and Terrence are out tonight. The FlipSide starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the show. We're pleased to be joined tonight by Neil Doran. Neil is it fair to say, recently appointed airport director?
Yeah, I would still say recent.
How long have you been with us now?
Since October 31st, 2022.
And you are, officially your title is Director of the Hagerstown Regional Airport, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So Neil, first of all, tell us about your history, tell us why you were interested in our airport and what brought you to Hagerstown.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be on the program. My interest initially was in manned space flight. Growing up, I always followed the Apollo flights to the moon and the space shuttle and things of that nature. And in the mid-2000s, I started noticing my local airport. I was living in western North Carolina at the time and see cargo planes flying overhead. We'd drive out to the airport. This was in the city of Hickory, which is northwest of Charlotte. Mm-hmm. And just really enjoyed being in the airport environment and started teaching myself, getting online, what could I read, what could I learn about airport operations. And I thought, well, how neat it would be to work at an airport. So that started a process of trying to pick up credentials and schooling so that I could qualify to work in the aviation field. I started at a fixed-based operation in Tweed, New Haven Regional Airport in coastal Connecticut. And I worked there fueling airplanes and pulling aircraft in and out of hangars. I worked with an aircraft maintenance and repair operation there at that same airport, not as a mechanic, but really billing and supplies and working along with mechanics on the financial side of their work. Then I had an opportunity to work up at the Hartford Bradley International Airport, which is between Hartford and Springfield, and I worked with Delta Airlines there. They had a pretty large operation.
Wait, Hartford, Connecticut?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an airport that's shared.
It's crazy, but my daughter just flew out of there just about a week and a half ago, and I had never heard of that airport before.
Yeah, it's a fairly large airport. I would say probably in the top 30 or 40 largest airports in the United States.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And Delta Airlines had a big operation there. We would have 13 to 14 different types of aircraft every day. In the summer, we'd get the exciting diversions of the international aircraft that maybe couldn't land at JFK or Boston. And they would divert there to Hartford, and we'd take care of them. Got to work international operations as well. And so I managed the below wing or the ramp operations for Delta there for a period of time. And then because I was living in coastal Connecticut and I had that long drive almost up to the Massachusetts border, had an opportunity to go back to Tweed Airport again and work there until the fall of 2016 when a chance happening to apply for an airport management job in Martinsburg, West Virginia came up. So I worked there for 6 years just down the road, and that was very neat. Many people know that to be the home of the 167th Airlift Wing.
Absolutely.
The C-17 Globemasters that fly around the region. So that was like a joint use airport, but also a very busy airport as a general aviation reliever.
So general aviation, but they didn't do a lot of commercial flights, correct?
That's correct, yeah. Martinsburg hadn't had scheduled airline service since the late 1970s when the airline industry deregulated.
Yeah. But fortunately for Washington County, you had already had a lot of commercial experience from your Hartford or from your Connecticut experience.
Yes.
So you had FBO, you had joint use with military, you had commercial. Wow,
yeah.
That sounds like us.
Yeah, and in Martinsburg, I picked up another experience too. When the timing was right, there was a gentleman by the name of George Smith. He once operated the fixed-base operation in Hagerstown years ago. He was from Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. When he passed away, the company Aerosmith in Martinsburg operated for a time, wasn't doing very well, and his widow, Mrs. Smith, Judy, she decided to sell the assets of the FBO to our airport authority in Martinsburg. And so we were now operating the FBO. We acquired many different hangars and buildings that we didn't previously own. And this also meant we got the air charter certificate. So we were Flying King Air aircraft all around the eastern United States. We picked up 2 additional King Air aircraft and flew them. We managed those aircraft. We signed them via aircraft management agreements. So that was real exciting. I enjoyed my time in Martinsburg. But anybody in airport management really likes to work at the airports that have airline service. So when I saw the opening here in Hagerstown, I thought, well, why don't I speak to the nice people up there and see what's going on, and which we did. And in the fall of last year, 2022, I was able to join the staff at Hagerstown, and I have to date really enjoyed my experience so far.
So talk to me about, as you look back at those experiences, we all place a lot, well, I won't say we all, there are some that think that our airport is all about the commercial traffic. And as we know, we have some commercial traffic. We have Allegiant, which has been, in my view at least, very loyal to us. We used to have, and maybe we still do, but we used to have the Essential Air Service. And there have been other commercial type things going on at the airport. Talk to us about the commercial side of Washington County Hagerstown Regional Airport.
Yes, that's a good thought. So there are some airports that are commercial airports that have a little bit of general aviation. Hagerstown is really a general aviation airport that has a little bit of commercial. You see, we have one of the largest numbers of based aircraft among airports in Maryland and in the United States for that matter. So forward thinking decades ago to build all those T hangars out there at the airport was a good thing. The large corporate box hangars that have been constructed over the years in successful partnership with the county and with private operators has allowed us to have a tremendous number of businesses out at the airport. We're just trying to make a count the other day, and it was north of 30 entities that are out at the airport. And among Maryland's airports, Hagerstown is 3rd in total economic impact among Maryland airports. Over $300 million in impact each year. Taxes spent, how money just circulates within a community. It does a lot of good.
So, who do you know who the 2 above us are?
Oh, yes. So that would be BWI, obviously number 1. And then a little bit beyond where we're at would be Martin State Airport, which is also there in Baltimore.
Okay.
But surprisingly, our numbers surpass all the other airports, and including Frederick and others that are quite busy.
Okay.
Salisbury.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So on the commercial side, we have Allegiant. Are there? I know things contract and expand with seasonally, and also based on travel habits, I guess. What can we expect? Do you have any big announcements you'd like to make about the commercial side here on the show tonight, or is there any insight you can give us about the continued relationship with Allegiant?
The relationship with Allegiant is very good. We had a nice meeting with them in April at their headquarters in Las Vegas, and all of our routes are safe. They're making money for the airlines.
Now because some of our viewers may not know the routes, and they may be driving to BWI or Dulles or somewhere else to catch a plane to go somewhere that they could just come to Hagerstown.
Yeah, you may not need to do that.
Parking's free, right? And I'm sure that's one of just many advantages of flying out of Hagerstown.
Yes, there are many advantages of flying out of Hagerstown. So just to review, year-round we have flights to Orlando Sanford Airport. The Orlando Sanford Airport is northeast of Orlando.
And how far northeast? If I go to Orlando Sanford and jump in a cab to go to Disney, how far am I going to?
Yeah, I would say it's within a half-hour drive of those kinds of destinations. In the same
very
way,
doable.
Absolutely.
So less time than you would spend driving to BWI to catch a flight to Orlando International Airport.
Yes. And the other factor is when you come to Hagerstown, from where you park your car, you've got a short line to get through security. You've got a short line in ticketing if you even need to go there. You have very few passengers in front of you. So the time at the airport is much less. And Allegiant's airport there in Sanford is also the same way. You're not going to have the same kind of delays if you flew to Orlando International, where you know, I'll give you an example. I flew out of Dulles Airport recently, and what you've got to do between getting from a remote lot onto a bus to drive you to the terminal, to go into a big long security line, and then you got to get on a train. You're a half hour or more just to get to your gate at an airport that large.
And that's assuming there's not a huge line at security, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, because I've waited in security lines for half hour, 45 minutes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you'll never have that experience in Hagerstown, and it's a lower stress airport environment. We found people that will drive as far away as from Richmond, Virginia. They'll come all the way up to Hagerstown, bypass all these other airports to use us
Because they
it's
don't
such
have
a
to
nice
mess.
experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Have you ever been through a TSA line and they say, oh, well, you know, your shampoo bottle's too big, or you can't have that liquid over 3.4 ounces,
Right.
and you got to take it out? Well, at Hagerstown, if time allows, I've seen our TSA people give a gray tub and allow people to walk that item back to their car. Now, had you gone to a big airport, they're going to make you throw it out. You're going to lose that item. So I think that's another benefit of Hagerstown.
So we
the
don't
scale of it.
change the rules, but what we do is we have more flexibility to say, hey, we get it. You brought this on by accident.
We're just generally a more chill airport, and we're very compassionate. I mean, people might lose their stuffed animal in the terminal, and we care. We're trying to make that reunion possible. Maybe you saw that on social media recently.
I did, actually.
So getting back to our destinations, we also fly 9 or 10 months out of the year to the Gulf Coast, St. Petersburg Clearwater Airport. That's a beautiful place. And then in the summer, we have summer seasonal service for 2 to 3 months to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So these are all great places to go to. Allegiant is a travel company, so you're not just buying the airfare from them. You can get your car, your rental car. You can book your hotel through them, and increasingly, they're building a resort now in the Gulf Coast of Florida in the community of Port Charlotte. It's called the Sunseeker Resort. And so the idea is they could fill that resort with the traffic that they generate with their own airline, and then they would own everything. All the on-site amenities, all of the bars and restaurants and stuff would all be owned by the Allegiant Travel Company. And so they're really thinking in the ways of providing a complete, turnkey travel experience for people that they'll really like.
That's neat. So, one of the things you hear about Allegiant from some people, and I'll say some people, is that, well, the fares are cheap, but they fee you to death. And then I hear on the other side, hey, I got in, I took I'm still saving $100 or $200 or whatever it is, even though there are some fees, and there's fees with everything, right? You can't buy anything anymore without a fee. Talk to me about the reality. What is the truth from someone with your level of expertise about the fee structure with Allegiant? Is it a money saver?
It can be, yeah, and education is power, Well, I appreciate when things are a la carte. If you have baggage dimensions, well, you make sure you have a bag that will fit. Make sure it's the right weight. And then you're not going to be dinged by those things.
Are Allegiant's bagging dimensions the same as, because that you buy, if you go to places, you buy the carry-on, and it's a certain size because that fits the majority of airlines' requirements. Is Allegiant similar in that?
They do vary airline to airline. But I think that they recently made a change to bring what they charge and the dimensions in line with what most other carriers are doing. Okay. So I think it's comparable.
Okay, so it's comparable.
You have power when things are a la carte. If you understand the system and you understand what might cost you extra in the cabin or at the ticket counter, you understand those things, you can electively choose to buy something or not buy something. If you don't need a printed ticket and you use a smartphone app, you save money that way. So I think that's better than the old days when all these value-added services were thrown into the fare itself, and you had no control over whether those things would be charged to you or not. So yeah, some people fly very cheaply. They shop around and they can find deals sometimes for as little as $29 or $39. I tell you, you can't drive to Florida for that amount of money. So yeah, it's still a good deal.
Yeah, you can't. No way you can. I've driven to Florida. Number one, it's a pain.
Yeah.
And number two, no, that's 3 or 4 tanks of gas, even in the best of scenarios. Okay, interesting.
But those fees are critical for the airline. If we look at what an airline reports to the government as far as the money they make on the ticket sales, we suspect that's only about half of what the airline actually generates. So all those are the things that they can charge for really help their bottom line.
And Allegiant at one point, and this was a while back, Allegiant, there was an article that expressed safety concerns with Allegiant, but their safety record, if you look at it, I mean, it's not.
Oh yeah,
that's great.
That's old news.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But people still refer to that, and that bothers me because who among us, what business hasn't had issues at some point in their history, right?
Well, Allegiant, when they first started, they keep their costs low, and they were operating at that time in history a fleet of older McDonnell Douglas
MD-80s.
aircraft. Yeah,
right.
And there were some mechanical issues and hiccups, but nothing that was threatening to life safety. What was also coinciding with a lot of that media coverage was labor disputes with pilot groups, who in situations like that are happy to make management look bad or make things look worse than they really were. I think both things were at work at that time. But I tell you, now in 2023, they fly a beautiful young fleet of Airbus 319 and 320.
Okay.
And they're ordering for the first time brand new Boeing 737 models.
I read an article about that somewhere. I
Yeah.
don't know whether it was on the Allegiant website or where, but I read an article.
So those planes are going to offer enhanced fuel efficiency for the airline. So what they've told us is a lot of the 125 cities that they serve, they'll be able to connect up more of them. Orlando Sanford will be one of their first, if you will, focus cities or hubs that will get those new aircraft. So we might see them in Hagerstown before too long. That's really exciting, and they'll be larger in terms of the cabin. The larger one, the aircraft model they're buying will hold 200 passengers.
Now that's the 737?
Yes, it's called 737 MAX 8 200.
Okay.
And then they have a smaller one as well. I
Okay.
think it's the MAX 7.
So talk to me about your experience with Allegiant in terms of our relationship. I'm sure we're not the biggest customer they have, and we don't provide the most boardings and off-boardings.
Correct. We're not the biggest, but neither are we the smallest in their system. I think we're near the top in terms of our performance statistics and stuff, so they really like us.
So
From what I've heard,
when we call, they answer the call.
Well, yeah. What I mean to say is the pilots and the crews really like us. I've heard that they kind of argue and compete with each other. They all want to take the HDR routes because they really like being here.
Okay.
And our team really takes good care of them when they're here.
Excellent.
We're always talking to them about ways that they might be able to offer new flights, more frequencies, or new destinations, and how do we get there? And part of it is, with our relationship with them, all the people on the ground are employed by Washington County, their airport staff, rather than working for the airline. So we have a partnership where we have to supply the ground handling people. The folks behind the ticket counter are our people, the firefighters, the security, all those functions we provide. And so we've been looking at ways that we can generate additional revenue so we can grow to support enhanced schedules and more flying.
So how does Washington County Airport go about, if we get an idea that it would be great to provide service to, you name the city, how do we go about socializing that with Allegiant, and how do we go about proving that yes, that will be a good investment for them? Or is that in our bailiwick, or is that something that they have to go back and do their own research?
Well, they're always doing their own research. They have a network planning department that's always thinking about where do we best put our limited fleet of aircraft? Where will they make the most money? And so, when you're looking at tight margins, you like the airports where your cost per enplanement, CPE, is kept low. So in Hagerstown, it's a much lower number than what it costs down the road at BWI or Dulles. Just because the cost of entering an airport like that is just so expensive to rent counter space and offices, to have a third-party contractor to serve your flights. It's just an environment that's just more costly for them to operate at. So we always make the pitch. We can serve some of the same customers in the same region from Hagerstown and do it at a lower price point where they will make more money on that same flight. We're also trying to get the word out and say we'll improve our marketing efforts, or we'll partner with local convention and visitors bureaus and local hotels and other things to enhance the status of our community and how well we're promoting their brand. Another thing we're doing that we've recently embarked upon was a solicitation for air service development services. That is, these expert consultants that maybe years ago they worked in airline route planning, and now they have companies that assist small communities and assist airports that want to grow with making these introductions to airlines and putting together detailed analysis data points that show why they should consider Hagerstown over other communities. But honestly, it does involve more travel. It does involve more meetings, more introductions. Just this month, I'll be going to the Takeoff Conference in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And what we found is Hagerstown never attended these things. They never put their name out there and said, hey, we'd like to talk with you, and talk to as many airlines as will take a meeting and say, we'd just like to introduce our community to you and point out how our area is growing in population and in affluence, how we have this westward migration of people from Washington, Baltimore, which is now the third largest combined statistical area in the United States. It's surpassed Chicago, believe it or not. You know, within 120 miles of us, there's 11 million people here. Highly educated people with money to spend to travel. And if we can just get an incrementally larger piece of a huge pie, the airport will look a lot healthier financially and be growing just through those efforts.
So to summarize, because you've packed a lot into those last couple of statements you made. First of all, one of our go-to-market strategies is we are more efficient for the airline. Therefore, it costs them less to service the same customers that they would get at Dulles or BWI or Reagan or some other larger airport. And secondarily, from a marketing perspective, we're now looking at more or less just getting our name out there to more airlines, respecting obviously the relationship of Allegiant, but getting our name out to more airlines through this takeoff event and potentially others?
Yes. The idea was that if we select a consultant, and we're going through that process now, that someone like me could travel to these events and then have the consultant support. Or if we want to make a visit to the airline's headquarters, that we have consultant support to make a pitch or a proposal.
And is this consultant going to be on a contractual basis, on a kind of one-off, not a full-time employee of?
No. It's really about having that kind of help on retainer. And in the past, the airport would have a once-a-year annual meeting with Allegiant to talk about the routes, like I said, this visit in April. But if they didn't budget or they didn't plan to talk to anyone else, you find that small communities have to work harder to have airline service than ever before. You've got the pilot shortage, you've got just the increasing cost for everything from fuel and insurance and all of these things, all these scarcities at work. That smaller communities have to work harder, they have to advocate more, and increasingly they have to show that they're capable of growing, that they have the facilities, that they have the staff, that they have a good financial plan to spend money where they need to for things like marketing. But they also have to show sometimes that they will help the airlines start their operations and incur a minimal amount of risk. Because nothing loses money faster than scheduled airline service when the passengers aren't showing up. You can just hemorrhage, you can bleed money very, very fast.
Sure.
So sometimes there's help with marketing, sometimes there's even revenue guarantees that sometimes communities provide to airlines, and sometimes there are opportunities that involve grant funds. There's a program called the Small Community Air Service Development Grant, or SCASD. These are funds from the Department of Transportation, and you might assemble a package that includes local money, this money from the federal government, and you have letters of interest from airlines saying, well, we will try that route from that community, and this is the plan to use the money to get that started, with the hope that over time consumer support will be there and it can stand on its own 2 feet.
Okay. There was, before we end the notion of the commercial segment of the operations, and I know we have equally as much to talk about on the FBO and,
yes,
and some of the other things, but Talk to me about the facilities that are available. We talked about the parking, we talked about the short walk, we talked about the security, we talked about the approach by our local TSA people and our local airport staff. But talk to me about the facilities themselves. How have the facilities changed? What can the facilities accommodate in growth in terms of the commercial side of the service?
Yes, thank you. A project was completed, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 years, which expanded the passenger hold room. That is the area after you clear security where you wait. And
that used to be that little
used to be
patio-looking thing that
Yeah.
I call that just had seats all around the side and a couple of center rows.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So it used to be able to hold a maximum of 150 people, and now it's quite a bit larger. I would say easily 300 people can sit in that area now. We've got a snack bar there. I think it's a beautiful modern space, but one thing for a community of our size that's really rare is we have a passenger boarding bridge. We have a jet bridge.
I saw that article when that project was going on. That's great.
And I tell you, most small communities, you still have to go outside and go on a ramp to get inside an airplane.
I've got video of your predecessor wheeling the steps out to the first Allegiant plane that came in, right?
Yeah. So those boarding bridges, they're expensive to acquire and to maintain, but really what we have at Hagerstown is kind of those big city amenities, but the small town charm and the environment and the friendliness.
Yeah, at one point I know we had at one point purchased a scanning device that was probably state of the art at that point, and maybe still is, high on the list. That everybody was like, "Wow, how did you get that?"
Well, the TSA has recently upgraded some of the equipment there at the TSA security checkpoint, like equipment that will validate very quickly your, government issued photo ID or 3D scanning devices and stuff that will look at your baggage. And there is still another project that's in the near-term horizon, likely will be completed this year, that's for the checked baggage, the bags that you hand over to someone at the ticket counter. Behind the scenes, people don't see this, but that is where the TSA hand checks bags just to make sure that's safe. And that process will be sped up because there will be additional scanning machines behind the scenes that can also look at your checked bags before it's loaded into the aircraft. So that's an improvement. We have different ideas on the land side portion, the lobby side, the parking lot side, of making an improvement over in our ticketing area where we may have additional counters or additional support space and offices where if we did have another airline, they'd have a little bit more room for their staff and their needs. So I think it's a modern building. It's in pretty good shape. I think it's about 24,000 square feet altogether. That's where our offices are located as well. And we've got a big lawn in front, where if we want to add additional paved parking, we can do that over time. So I don't see us as terribly constrained in terms of our aircraft ramp or parking apron. We typically bring one aircraft in at a time, but if we were to adjust the orientation of how aircraft park, we could easily add 2 gates or 2 parking positions there. And then off to the west a little bit over by our fire station, we have another parking area as well where additional aircraft can be parked as needed. So if I meet with Allegiant and I say, do you want to make us an aircraft base where there's crews and flight attendants and they start the day leaving from Hagerstown, that creates local jobs, but it also means we'd likely have flights to more destinations because the airplane is overnighting there and it's starting the day. So we do have the ability to serve multiple airplanes at once. We do have enough space.
And you make a good point. We can't forget about the jobs that are created by this airport and the commercial side of it. And I'm guessing the majority of jobs are related to the businesses and the FBO around the airport, but the commercial side certainly provides its share of jobs as well.
Yes, we have about 30 employees in our department. There are a few other businesses like Avis Budget Rental Car that has their employees in the terminal itself. But most of the approximately 2,000 jobs on the airport are related to the Ryder Jet Center FBO and all those many companies like Sierra Nevada Royal Aircraft, Plane Care. I'm always afraid I'll forget somebody because we have more companies than you realize. We have the Aviation School, PIA.
Right.
At least for the moment, that is the only school in Maryland that is training aircraft mechanics, and they're going to be doing an exciting expansion that will make their building a little bit larger.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've been there far more times than I have, but if you walk in there and you see what's going on, it is impressive.
Absolutely
That
impressive.
that is an impressive facility, and the people that run it are impressive as well.
They're doing good work. We hear all the time about pilot shortage. That's true, but the shortage of mechanics is actually a worse problem.
Absolutely.
Worse problem. So they're doing their part to try to train the next generation of mechanics.
What else should we know about the commercial side of the business?
Specifically the commercial airline services. Yeah, we're doing all we can to have as many flights as we can. But because we have to serve that largely with our own people, the revenue strategies that we have suggested to the Board of County Commissioners are something that we'd like to talk a little bit about, which is our ongoing need for revenue to be generated at the airport. A lot of people don't realize that we're an enterprise fund. What that means is we're a closed financial system where we have to live off the dollars we earn. So we're not going downtown and asking most years for general taxpayer dollars to be allocated to us. We're living within our means.
That's an important piece.
Yeah, and it's something that we don't want to change, and it's something that we take pride in. Most airports do not have that self-sustaining status. But when we're talking about exciting things like growing, it's just going to take more to maintain what we're already doing, and it's definitely going to take more to grow. And to really be serious when you talk to an airline about let's do these big things, you got to have the people. You got to comply with federal regulations, be that the Federal Aviation Administration or the Transportation Security Administration. We've got to jump through all those hoops and continue compliant. And so we had a strategic business plan document recently shared with the county commissioners, and it included the idea, really an observation from these expert consultants, that all these people pass through our terminal, and we, as a county department, don't collect any money from anyone. You mentioned the free parking. We don't collect money for parking. Mm-hmm. We do not have a passenger facilities charge. When you buy a ticket, down in the fine print at the bottom, the PFC is just a few dollars that when it goes to an airport, it helps with their expenses in providing the bathrooms and keeping the lights on and having the necessary firefighters to keep everybody safe, and the sheriff's deputy at the security checkpoint. All these things cost money. So the recommendation is, if we could have those financial tools in our toolbox, just like nearly all the other airports in the Allegiant system and nationwide, then we'll have the means necessary to keep growing. There are a lot of regulatory things that we have to do that are required of us, and there's no grant to get an updated wildlife study that costs $100,000. There's no grant for what's considered to be routine maintenance, like put black outlines around your white painted markings on your runway. Well, that's $150,000. And increasingly, it's hard to say, well, I have that just from my ground leases or my T-hanger tenants or whatever.
But what you're talking about really is a fee structure that will have minimum impact on the average flyer, but have, over time, substantial benefits to us being able to continue to expand and provide more services to those that choose to use the commercial services at Hagerstown.
Absolutely. When I look at Facebook and I see the comments people make, we would like to have more flights. There's a path to that, but it takes resources. It takes cash, and it takes people, on your team. And the way we get there it is those financial tools. But we're not talking about gouging anyone. We would talk, fees that are so small they're a nuisance fee. But they're not so large that it causes anybody to change their itinerary or not fly from your city or offends people, shocks people, nothing like that. It certainly would never be priced as high as what it costs down at BWI or Dulles or Reagan, because we want local people not to make that drive. We want them to fly
And
HDR.
you made the argument earlier that part of why we are attractive is that we are efficient. We cost less for the airlines, we cost less for the passengers, we offer these services that traditionally is going to cost them time and money.
Yes, it does. It
Excellent.
does. But when we are dealing with an ultra low cost carrier, and you have arrangements where you're largely paying the cost to support those flights, in my mind it makes sense to just say, can we have a contribution from
Absolutely.
each one of those passengers that pass through our building of just a few bucks, and it would be a game changer for us.
Okay. We have more to talk about, but at this point I need to take a break. Our producer has been screaming at me for the last 10 minutes
Okay.
because we're over on time, but can you stay around for another segment?
I'd love to. Thank you.
When we come back, more about the Hagerstown Regional Airport. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're here once again with Neil Doran from the Hagerstown Regional Airport. Neil, I don't know whether I asked you this before, but what is your official title? Director?
Just simply airport director.
Airport Director. So we talked a lot about the commercial service, and I'd love to say that we're finished that segment because we've only got about 20 minutes left in the show, but I'm not. Let's talk about the leadership piece, and let's talk about some of the other funding mechanisms that you have. So first of all, essential air service. Is that still a thing? Tell us what it is. Tell us how that works.
Yes, the program still exists. So you might remember up till 1978, the Carter administration, we had the Civil Aeronautics Board. We had government regulating ticket prices, regulating where the air carriers flew. And the government always did a nice job of making sure that rural America had good connectivity. You actually had a similar level of quality aircraft and frequencies if you lived in a rural area as in a big city when the government regulated it. In 1978, with the promise of deregulation, there was a lot of growth. It reduced the cost of flying. It no longer costs the price of a first-class ticket. It had opened it up to the people. But what everyone feared would happen did happen, which is that rural America was largely abandoned by the air carriers.
Because it wasn't profitable.
Yes, it's not profitable. Now, when the government regulated it, they ensured the airlines would always earn a profit. And they would give a particular area for the carriers to fly without any competition. But in exchange for serving the cities that didn't make money, they were also allowed to serve the cities where they made lots of money. Mm-hmm. And so it was a good trade-off. But with deregulation, what you found is that communities that were within a reasonable drive of a big city, like Martinsburg, West Virginia, or Hagerstown, Maryland, or Elkins, West Virginia, or Cumberland, increasingly air service would leave and people were said, drive to Washington National Airport.
Right.
And so that's how that happened. Hundreds and hundreds of cities lost air service. So in 1978, they created a backstop program called the Essential Air Service Program, EAS. And Hagerstown was one of those communities that was eligible. And so this is a subsidy program that meant that air carriers could bid for service to provide a minimal number of flights to a nearby hub airport. And so for decades, Hagerstown had this. Maybe there were carriers like Southern Airways Express or Cape Air or US Air Express, Allegheny. And this is even after Henson Commuter and all of that kind of history. But in 2019, finally, Hagerstown was removed from the program. They were removed because they no longer continued to hit these targets. That is,
Employments?
well, rules that are set up to basically take communities that weren't quite performing as well as others and remove them from the program. Because Congress will allocate a fixed amount of money. In recent years, $200 to $300 million. Half of the money is for Alaska because they don't have roads and people need to get to doctor's appointments and other things. So half the money is for Alaska. And then the rest of the money really needs to be for communities that are so geographically remote that their drive is just crazy, like in the Rocky Mountain states. They need to get to Salt Lake City or to Denver or to Phoenix. But you had, for political reasons in the East, a lot of states that had communities that have hung on essential airline service communities, and they offer this kind of feeder flight. And so, yes, Hagerstown increasingly was seen as no longer compliant with the rules that they created because the money didn't go as far, and they needed to find a means or a mechanism. And so they'd say, well, Hagerstown is within such and such miles of driving distance from Dulles, so we want to cancel them. Or Hagerstown didn't meet this enplanement numbers of 10 passengers a day, so we want to cancel it. And DOT would always go to cancel it, and then someone from the Maryland delegation would step in, a congressman or a senator, and say, DOT, leave that right there. And so they always stuck around. So DOT's efforts to kick Hagerstown out didn't start in 2019. It probably started in like 2004. And it were just repeated waivers that were given, repeated political efforts to keep them in that program. But by 2019, they were kicked out. They tried all their legal options to appeal, and they were unsuccessful. So where is that? Well, once you're out, you can't get back in. Since 2012, it's a closed program in that sense. And Congress doesn't have an appetite to put more money into that program, not more than $300 million a year, at a time when many communities are getting regional jets that will fly as much as $6 or $7 million a year in subsidy. Well, you tell me how you can serve now more than 100 cities, communities, with that budget and still provide the service that's become so expensive. It's just not working. So we do need a better, more sensible federal policy about essential air. And so there's one idea which is very intriguing. I'd love to tell you about it.
Go ahead.
It has to do with the use of motor coach buses. There's a company called Landline that has made partnerships in 3 hub cities. There's capacity at American, at the Philadelphia hub, where they use motor coach buses to replace what they normally would have used an aircraft for. And they would connect to cities like Atlantic City or Allentown, Pennsylvania, or Lancaster. They're beautiful buses, you know, ones that normally would have 60 seats in them. They strip it down to about 30 seats, and they put first-class airline seats in there. So you got, like, you can watch movies, and you got Wi-Fi. It's very comfortable. You got in-seat charging. But they've partnered with the TSA, where at that outlying airport, you clear security. You check in at that airport gate, but you board the bus instead of an airplane. And the bus is TSA cleared, it's sterile, it's secure. They drive directly to the major hub airport, but they don't drop you off at the curb where you have to check in again. They can drop you off airside at the gate, and seamlessly they take care of your bag for you. So you buy your ticket from American Airlines. That's your final destination, be it Lancaster or Allentown. But the cost to the airline to provide that segment of transportation
Is much less.
is much, much less. So what could happen? Well, we'd have to politically have someone in the federal delegation make moves to allow Hagerstown to get back in. We'd have to have subsidies again. But then could we partner with Landline and then say, I'm just sketching here an idea.
Yeah, I get it.
But let's say United Airlines. You come to Hagerstown, you park your car in Hagerstown, you got the United branding, you got a ticket counter, but you go through security and you board a bus, and the bus drives you to Dulles. The worst parts of Dulles are having to go through their parking lots and go through their terminal.
Yes, they are.
This would bring you right to the gate. So I kind of daydream about maybe we could have that subsidy again, but if we did, we want it for something that will be successful. Unfortunately,
And cost effective.
and cost effective, yeah. Looking at the prices, it's a fraction. We're really talking about something that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to provide instead of millions of dollars to provide. So if DOT says all these communities that are within a reasonable driving distance of a hub, that they still provide the subsidy, but they do it with motor coach buses and save the airplanes for the really long routes, that would be able to do much, much more with the same amount of money. It would also help many communities that have lost service and been cut off, like Williamsport, PA, and Del Rio, Texas, and others, to once again have service. And then with the upcoming House version of the reauthorization bill, they have a section in there where airports would be allowed to continue counting that as a passenger boarding or an enplanement, even though they got on a motor coach bus.
Wow.
So it's very kind of cutting edge, experimental, it's still being proven out, but perhaps that would be an example where we could have something for business travelers in Hagerstown, and something where we would have multiple daily flights with a motor coach, but now we're on the United route map or we're on the American route map. I think that's very exciting, and the kind of fees that they would pay to an airport would be very similar to what we would get if it was an airline. So that's one of the companies I hope to meet with further in Atlantic City, is talk to Landline a bit more about this idea.
Interesting. So the airport is run by the county, correct?
Yes, it's an asset of the county.
However, you have a board,
Yes.
an advisory board, that is integral in providing input and suggestions. Talk to me about the management of the airport and how that all works, and what you find that specifically the advisory board brings to the table, how they're able to help you.
Yes. So ultimately, the really big decisions are made by the Board of County Commissioners, as it should be. The county is owned by the airport. The airport employees are a county department, much like other departments. But we have a nice tool with the Airport Advisory Commission, in that we have volunteers from the community that are experienced. Many of them have done big things in the business world, and they bring their advice, they bring their insights to assist me, really, and our team. And we have meetings most months, and we're allowed to talk about things that the airport's dealing with, and we appreciate when they see some of the things that we're seeing, that they lend their support for initiatives. For instance, the strategic plan that was largely a work product of the outside consultants in consultation with the staff and my boss, Andrew Eshelman, the Director of Public Works, that the AAC looks at it, they give their comments, and they give their concurrence, and they've really given their blessing. They wanted the message taken to the county commissioners that they've looked at it and they think this is also our path forward. So I'm really glad to have their help, and that they volunteer in this way and share their insights.
Well, and from an outsider's perspective, I can tell you without question, those that I know on that commission advocate for our airport and reassure the citizens of this county about how important that is to our economic future.
It is. It's a fantastic history. I was just reading a book about Mr. Henson, and going all the way back to the 1920s. For a community of our size to have had so much share in aviation history, with Fairchild and with the development of commuter air service, and now what companies do in support of national defense needs, it's really a neat thing. Support of Camp David as well.
Yeah. We have about 6 minutes left, and I know that a large percentage of the airport is the fixed-base operations. We need to talk about that.
Yes.
Talk about the businesses around the airport. Talk about what they do and what they contribute, not only to us in terms of jobs, but also in terms of the national things that they do, much like you just started to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, so there's more than 5,000 public airports in the United States, but I would say Hagerstown is probably the top 200, top 250 by many metrics, like the number of based aircraft we have, the number of companies we have in the field, our economic impact. They're really impressive. So the facilities of the Ryder Jet Center, for instance, are very attractive. We've got the grill at runways, the beautiful restaurant that people fly in to enjoy. We have Nick's Airport Inn, another fine dining option on the airport property. We've got companies like Sierra Nevada and all the work they're doing. I think they employ about 400 people at a multi-building campus on the airport. PIA, which is the school. We have Royal Aircraft. We have Plane Care. Terry Johns is another aircraft maintenance operation. Mr. Hahn. We have a doctor that provides the kind of checkups and screenings that people need to continue flying or to begin flying. It really runs the gamut. Flight training operations going on at the airport, the Hagerstown Aviation Museum, and all that's going on. So again, I fear I'll forget somebody because we have so many different varying aviation industries going on. But in the matter of maintenance and repair, engine work and overhauls, a lot of paint work for aircraft, structural repairs, retrieval of damaged aircraft. I mean, so many things are done, high quality work that people come to Hagerstown to get those services. And it's a good paying job for people. It infuses money into the state budget and local budget. And to the extent the community is aware of all that's going on at the airport, it's only going to build pride in our community, help us have a positive view of Hagerstown and Washington County.
So structurally, from an asset perspective, the land that these facilities are on, that's owned by the county?
Correct.
Okay. So everything that we see around the airport is a lease situation?
Yes, yes. So for airports in the United States, they're not allowed to sell the public land, but they can enter into arrangements for land leasing, where there is a term given that allows a project proponent to, say, build a hangar and operate a business for an amount of time that will allow them to fully earn back their money to amortize their investment. So over the years, that's happened. There's been a build out. We have one of the most developed airports in Maryland, and there is typically reversion clauses with those properties. So at the end of the term, the improvement, the structure that was built becomes county property at that time. So that allows folks to build something, to have a presence there at the airport for relatively small amounts of money, but then at the end, there's the upside for the county, for the airport itself, in that once they own the structure, then they too may charge for rent for the hangar, if you will, and not just the land underneath it.
Wow. What else should we know about the fixed base operations?
Well, they have beautiful facilities. We appreciate the partnership over the years with the Riders, and Ben Ryder and Mike Barnhart, the general manager. A pleasure to work with them. We found over the years that if someone needed to build a hangar or wanted to come to Hagerstown, they were a good partner in being able to build that structure rather swiftly and move at the pace of business and make those facilities ready so that company could come to Hagerstown. A company like DST, I almost forgot about them. They're another valuable tenant at the airport.
So one of the other things that we hear about from time to time, in terms of its ability to handle growth, where are we in terms of our basic tower, our tower at the airport?
The air traffic control tower?
Yes.
Yeah, we need a new one. The one we have is aging. And so there's all sorts of kind of structural problems with the tower, and heating and air ventilation, and mold and mildew and rust and things that happen when things get too old, obsolete. We also have the problem when the tower's too short. In order to do their job fully, they need a line of sight from their vantage point in the tower cab to see the full extent of the runway and the taxiways and all the properties. So it's a need. It's been identified. We've done a siting study. We know what the new tower would look like. We know how much it would cost. The problem is that the tower is owned by the FAA. So we can't take advantage of some of the bipartisan infrastructure law monies that are out there to build new towers, because that money, curiously, is only for situations where the airport owns the tower rather than the FAA owning the tower. So we're speaking to our congressional delegation about this problem, and I see movement to try to get the FAA to be more transparent about their process for selecting aging towers and when they will be replaced. And so we're hoping through maybe a federal earmark or just further communication with the FAA that our tower will be placed on their internal replacement list.
Well, Neil, our airline, our air operations has a rich history in Hagerstown, and
Yes.
from talking to you, it has a rich future as well. So thank you for your leadership. I'm excited with all that you bring in terms of your experience and knowledge. I'm excited about all the businesses that are out there and the commercial opportunities that you're going to start to look into more specifically in some of these areas. And thank you for appearing tonight.
Thank you for the invitation. It was my pleasure. I always love talking about the airport.
I hope you'll come back and see us again here in 6 months or a year and tell us what new is going on at Hagerstown Regional Airport.
Yes, thank you so much. We hope to have more to report.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you'll follow us on Twitter. We hope you'll send your suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most importantly, join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.